Sex, lies, Iran, Israel, and Wikileaks. All very serious subjects, so to start with, here's a joke. A psychiatrist is showing a patient some pictures to try and get some idea about his mental state. Each time he is asked what a picture brings to his mind, the patient says,
Sex. 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 Sex.
Finally, the psychiatrist says, well, clearly you are absolutely obsessed about sex.
I'm obsessed,
Cries the patient.
You're the one with all the pornographic pictures.
I was reminded of that old joke by the news editors of these infamous purveyors of lies and half-truths, as they displayed their own almost pornographic and collective obsession about what they all relentlessly homed in on out of 250,000 documents, anything that had to do with Iran's so-called nuclear threat. Here are some samples. The BBC. No need to read out the headlines, but in the body copy we find they include reports of some Arab leaders, including Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah, urging the US to attack Iran and end its nuclear weapons program. I was unable to find a date related to the cable, nor any evidence of its authenticity. CNN was singing much the same song, but favouring the word anxiety rather than concerns. But a date was mentioned, a matter to which I'll return. Australia's ABC News ran with this headline, but gave no date or proof of authenticity. Then we had Reuters quoting The Guardian, which referred to these repeated calls by King Abdullah, but I missed capturing the Independent's contribution because this link didn't work. But the essence is quite clear from the first few words. Israel says Arabs agree on Iran threat. Well, what do you know? On the other hand, I could have read the London Times leader on Wikileaks by paying £1 for the privilege, an offer I found quite easy to refuse, but the free-to-read effort by the New York Times certainly made up for what I may have missed with this provocative headline and picture. Around the world, distress over Iran. And the irony is that the New York Times headline writer is quite correct. There is distress over Iran, distress at the way it has been cast in the role of the evildoer, when all but the most ignorant observers realize that it is nuclear-armed apartheid Israel that is the real threat, not Iran. Here's a short quiz, so get ready with your buzzers. Question 1. How many times do we see on TV or read in the newspapers that Israel has 200 or 300 ready-to-go nuclear weapons? Question 2. How many times do we see on TV or read in the newspapers that Iran's nuclear program is peaceful, as they claim it is? The answer to both questions is the same. Hardly ever, if at all. In the interest of balance, a report in the Jerusalem Post appears to show a glimmer of sanity. Syrian president says Iranian nuclear strike against Israel would result in massive Palestinian casualties, which Iran would never risk. And on December 6th, Haaretz came out with almost identical wording. Of course the Israeli hawks know that the Palestinians serve them as a protective shield, but their sights are on more distant horizons. Apart from oil, an ever-expanding Israeli population is going to need more and more water very soon. Having masterminded the utter ruination of Iraq, is it fanciful to suggest that the weakening of Iran, either through sanctions or a military attack, is the next step in Israel's ambition to dominate the Middle East from the Nile to the Euphrates and the Tigris? So watch out, Egypt. Peace pacts and accords don't last forever, as Turkey has recently learned. Now let's look at some chronology, which is a fancy way of saying the order in which certain events took place. The date mentioned in CNN's Let's Get Iran hit piece seems to refer to a cable dated Wednesday the 4th of November 2009, in which the US ambassador to Bahrain reported that King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa argued forcefully for taking action to terminate their nuclear program by whatever means necessary. That program must be stopped, the king allegedly said. Of course, the question that springs to mind is, what program? Surely the King of Bahrain would not deny Iran the right to produce its own nuclear energy, would he? So he must have been referring to the trumped-up, imaginary nuclear weapons program that the IAEA has still found absolutely no evidence for. And the false accusations on which the King of Bahrain based his statement, and that goes for the King of Saudi Arabia as well, were made by the President of the United States of America when he addressed the G20 conference on September 25, 2009, no more than 1 month and 9 days previously. So, over a year later, the mainstream media, thanks to Wikileaks, has been able to home in on statements made by kings and other heads of state that were based on false information. Here are some excerpts from a video I made about that speech.
The Iranian government presented a letter to the IAEA that made reference to a new enrichment facility years after they had started its construction.
Iran was not legally bound to inform anyone about commencing to build a new facility. It was only bound to give advance warning to the IAEA when a new facility was about to be utilized. So how could the president of the most powerful nation on earth have been so badly briefed? Or was he knowingly misleading the international community?
The existence of this facility underscores Iran's continuing unwillingness to meet its obligations under UN Security Council resolutions and IAEA requirements.
Wrong again, Mr. President, but as former weapons inspector Scott Ritter points out, more likely an attempt on the part of Iran to provide for strategic depth and survivability of its nuclear program in the face of repeated threats on the part of the US and Israel to bomb its nuclear infrastructure. The clear and present danger to the stability of the Middle East is Israel's possession of nuclear weapons and means of delivery. It is not Iran's nuclear ambitions, whether they are peaceful or aimed at the quite reasonable goal of protecting itself against Israel's threats. A nation which has already proved its total disregard for its fellow human beings by walling them into prison communities, bulldozing their homes, and dropping white phosphorus on them, from the very land and the air that they stole from them. Since then, the Israelis have assassinated Mahmoud al-Mabhouh in Dubai last January, using a bunch of killers armed with weapons and stolen passports, murderously and illegally attacked the Gaza Freedom Flotilla in international waters on May 31st, killing 9 people, and have refused, even for the sake of new peace talks, to extend their pause on building illegal structures on stolen Palestinian land. But, for some extraordinary reason, the spotlight is not on nuclear-armed apartheid Israel's appalling and inhuman behavior towards the Palestinians. It is back on Iran, which is, apparently, still meeting its obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty because the IAEA's new Director General has not released any reports to the contrary. So I cannot help but ask, does anyone else detect just the slightest imbalance here? Right, where are we? Sex. Oh, that was the joke at the beginning. No, sorry. That's all there is. This is a family show. The lies were courtesy of President Obama and were about Iran. Israel, all the rotten things it's done this year. So that leaves Wikileaks. Until this latest batch, I hadn't spent much time thinking about Wikileaks because for me, the entire edifice crashed and burned when its founder was reported as saying, "I'm constantly annoyed that people are distracted by false conspiracies such as 9/11, when all around we provide evidence of real conspiracies for war or mass financial fraud." The words of someone so inflated by his own self-esteem that he thinks that stolen or perhaps donated documents, which can be forged and otherwise manipulated, should take precedence over the stark, recorded evidence that proves the official version of 9/11 is a pack of lies. Huge buildings do not collapse in freefall for no reason, and even bigger ones do not eject molten iron caused by fires far less intense than those found in jet engine combustion chambers. But, give him his due, he does seem to be a godsend for the CIA and Mossad because of his views about 9/11. Come to think of it, if Julian Assange had not existed, the CIA and Mossad would have invented him. Finally, here's a rogues gallery of some of those behind-the-scenes people who see that the masses are kept uninformed. Anyone with an IQ above 90 and an internet connection knows that 9/11 could not have happened the way the world was told it happened. So how do we describe the people who are still covering that up? You can't call them prostitutes, Prostitutes only put themselves at risk, while people who are paid to deliberately mislead others and put their own children and millions of others at risk require a special kind of condemnation. The money they earn has blood on it. They are pariahs, and they should be treated as such. They are all part of a huge media circus, and the fact is, Wikileaks is just a sideshow to what's inside the big black tent. A sideshow to make you think that you are seeing a glimmer of the truth. But don't be fooled. The men and women who do the bidding of their mainstream media masters are the biggest threats of all. Unless they stop covering it up, the truth may not be the only thing to go up in flames. This is an orange. If you were told it was something else, you wouldn't believe it, would you? This is called visual identification based on experience. This building is about to be destroyed in what is called a controlled demolition. Buildings do not do this spontaneously. Here is another example of a controlled demolition. The initial charges are spaced about 1 second apart, and you can see that each section begins falling separately. Successful demolitions require that all structural support columns collapse at virtually the same time. If they don't, or if something else goes wrong, the result will look something like this. This is World Trade Center 7 just before it collapsed on September the 11th, 2001. It had not been hit by an aircraft. It had been damaged by falling debris and fire. But by 5:20 p.m. most of the fires had been extinguished. Although the building was 47 stories high, it doesn't fall sideways, nor collapse unevenly. For this to have happened, all of the building's vertical supports must have given way at almost exactly the same time. Yet the Federal Emergency Management Agency reported that the collapse was due primarily to fire. But what does it look like to you? As at July 2007, there is no final report on the collapse of World Trade Center 7. But the National Institute of Standards and Technology still rules out a controlled demolition. So the question is, do you believe what you can see with your own eyes, or do you believe what you are told?